The day she left, she said it was only for a little while. Two small children stood on the porch, holding each other, while their mother packed a suitcase and promised she would come back as soon as life became easier. Their father was gone. The house was heavy with grief. Her parents said they would help just for a few weeks, maybe a month, but she never really came back. The calls grew shorter, the visits stopped, birthdays passed. School years ended. The children stopped waiting at the window. Little by little, their grandparents became the ones who stayed up through fevers, signed report cards, and dried tears no one else saw. 10 years later, a car pulled into the same driveway. She stepped out looking nothing like the broken widow who had left. She looked certain, prepared, almost calm, and she did not come to apologize. She came to take them back. She said they were still her children. She said no one had the right to keep them from her. But after 10 years of silence, one question changed everything. Can a mother return and claim what she chose to leave behind? When her husband died, the world did not collapse all at once. It collapsed in pieces. First came the silence in the house, then the unpaid bills on the kitchen table. Then the nights when both children cried at the same time and she sat on the floor, too tired to cry with them. Before that, her life had been simple. Not easy, but steady. Her husband worked hard. She kept the house together. The children were loud, messy, and full of life. They had plans, small ones, ordinary ones, a better roof one day, a second-hand car that actually worked. Maybe a family trip in the summer. After the funeral, all of that disappeared. People came at first. Neighbors brought food. Her parents stayed late into the evening. Everyone told her the same thing. Be strong, do it for the children. Time will help. But time did not help. Time only showed her how much had changed. The money ran out faster than she expected. Her husband had left love behind, but not enough savings. There were rent payments, school clothes, food, electricity, medicine. Every week felt like a quiet emergency. She tried to keep going. She took part-time work where she could. She slept less, ate less, smiled when the children looked at her. Then went into the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror like she no longer knew who she was. Her parents saw it before she said a word. One evening, her mother placed a hand over hers and said, "Let us keep them for a while, just until you can breathe again." At first, she refused. Then one bill turned into 3. One bad week turned into another. The children began spending more nights at their grandparents' house. At first it was 2 nights, then 4, then whole weeks. The house grew quieter. And somewhere inside that quiet she met him. He was not dramatic, not dangerous. That was what made him easy to trust. He listened when she spoke. He asked how she was feeling. He told her she deserved more than survival. He lived in another town, had a better job, a cleaner life. No noise, no children running through the hallway, no memories sitting in every room. With him, she did not feel like a widow. She felt seen. That feeling became its own kind of danger. At first, she told herself it was only comfort, a place to rest, a chance to think. But slowly, without saying it out loud, she began imagining a different life. One where she was not always tired. One where she did not wake up already afraid of the day. When she told him about the children, he grew quiet. He did not say no. He said, "You need to decide what kind of life you want." The sentence stayed with her. Her parents kept saying the children were fine with them. Safe, fed, loved. She repeated those words in her head until they started sounding like permission. By the time she packed her suitcase, she had already turned guilt into logic. It's only for now. They're better off there. I'll come back when I'm stable. She kissed the children goodbye on the porch and promised she would return soon. They believed her because children always believe the person they still need most. Then she got into the car beside the man who offered her escape. And as the road pulled her farther from the house, she kept telling herself she was not leaving them forever. At first, she called almost every night. The children would sit near the phone after dinner, waiting for their grandmother to hand it to them. Their small voices would brighten the moment they heard hers. They would tell her about school, about a toy that broke, about the cat next door that kept sleeping on the porch. Sometimes they asked when she was coming back. Soon, she always said. It was the same word every time, soon. In the beginning, they believed it without question. Their grandparents believed it too. That was the painful part. No one saw this as abandonment at first. It felt like a hard season, a temporary arrangement, a daughter trying to survive. Two children being cared for by family until life settled down. But life has a way of hardening around repeated choices. The calls slowly changed. At first they became shorter, then less personal. She sounded distracted sometimes, as if the children had interrupted something else. When they asked her when she was coming home, she stopped answering right away. "Things are complicated," she would say, or "I'm trying to figure everything out." Then weeks passed between calls. The children still waited at the window some evenings. If a car slowed near the house, they turned their heads quickly. If the phone rang, they ran for it. Their grandmother watched all of this in silence, her face calm, her hands never still. Cooking, cleaning, folding clothes, making things feel normal. Their grandfather became quieter than usual. He was not a man who spoke much, but he noticed everything. He noticed how the boy stopped asking to save his mother a seat at the dinner table. He noticed how the girl started sleeping with one of her grandmother's old sweaters because it smelled like the house and not like loss. Meanwhile, in another town, the mother's new life was taking shape. A smaller apartment at first, then a better one, weekends away, new clothes. A life that did not ask her to explain herself every morning. The man she had left with was steady, practical. He liked peace. He liked order. He did not like talking about the past. Whenever the children came up, he listened, but only briefly. "They're safe with your parents," he would say. "That matters." And each time he said it, her guilt softened just enough to let her continue. She sent money when she could, small amounts. Never enough to raise two children, but enough to let herself believe she was still involved. On birthdays, gifts arrived late or not at all. Some years there was a card. Some years there was only silence. The children learned not to ask questions that made the room feel heavy. They stopped asking when she would visit. Then they stopped asking about her at all. That change was not sudden. It happened quietly, the way winter settles into a house one cold night at a time. Their grandparents became the ones who remembered school projects, packed lunches, and stayed awake through fevers. They were the ones who showed up when the children were scared, angry, proud, confused, or sick. Little by little, love stopped feeling like a promise made over the phone. It started looking like everyday presence, and somewhere along the way, the mother stopped being the center of their world. She became a voice they used to know. The years that followed did not feel dramatic from the outside. That was the strange part. No police reports, no court fight, no shouting at the front door. Just a family slowly rearranging itself around one absence. The children grew taller. The little shoes by the door became larger every season. School bags replaced toys on the living room floor. Their voices changed. Their questions changed too. At first, they still spoke about their mother carefully, as if saying too much might make the adults sad. Then they began speaking about her less. Not because they had stopped caring, because caring had become tiring. Their grandparents never asked for that role, but they stepped into it fully. Their days no longer belonged to them. Retirement became school runs, grocery lists, doctor visits, parent meetings, and long evenings at the kitchen table, helping with homework they had not expected to see again at their age. The grandfather fixed broken bicycles in the yard and stayed up late when the boy had a fever. The grandmother learned every small detail that made life easier. Which soup the girl wanted when she was upset, which shirt the boy hated wearing to school, which words could calm a bad dream before it turned into tears. They did all of it without making speeches about sacrifice. That is what made it so powerful. They never told the children they should be grateful. They never said, "Look what we gave up for you." They simply stayed, and staying day after day began to mean more than promises ever had. By the time the children were old enough to understand what 10 years really meant, they also understood something else. Their mother had choices. That realization did not come all at once. It arrived in pieces. When a classmate asked why their mother never came to school events, when they saw other families arguing and laughing and living through ordinary messes together. When holidays passed and her name was mentioned less and less, almost like the house itself was trying not to expect too much. Sometimes a card came in the mail. Sometimes money arrived months late. Sometimes nothing came at all. The children stopped waiting by the window. They stopped asking whether she might visit for birthdays or school plays. They learned how to protect themselves by expecting less. That was how the wound changed shape. It was no longer sharp. It became quiet. The kind of hurt that lives under normal life and only speaks when something touches it. On paper, she was still their mother. If someone looked at official records, her name was there. No judge had taken it away. No final decision had been written down. But real parenthood had already moved elsewhere. It lived in packed lunches and washed uniforms. In rides home after difficult school days. In the way their grandfather waited up when they were late. In the way their grandmother always noticed when one of them said, "I'm fine," but clearly was. The children never sat down and decided their grandparents had become their real parents. Life decided that for them. By the time they reached their teenage years, the mother who had once promised to come back no longer felt like someone missing. She felt like someone from before. A person tied to old photographs, a voice from an earlier version of life, someone who belonged to their story but not to their daily world. And the more stable that world became, the more dangerous one question started to feel. What would happen if she ever came back and expected everything to still belong to her? She came back on a quiet afternoon. No phone call first, no letter, no warning. Their grandmother was peeling potatoes at the kitchen sink when she saw a car slow down outside the house. At first she thought it was someone asking for directions. Then the engine cut off. A woman stepped out, well-dressed, hair neatly done, sunglasses, a leather bag on her arm. For 1 second the older woman did not recognize her own daughter. 10 years had changed the shape of her face. The softness was gone. So was the panic she used to carry in her eyes. She looked composed now, careful, almost rehearsed. By the time she reached the front door, the grandfather was already standing behind his wife. When the knock came, it was firm, not hesitant. Not ashamed, the grandmother opened the door slowly. Neither of them spoke at first. "I think we need to talk," the mother said. Not "I'm sorry," not "how are they," just that. The children were home from school. They were no longer really children, of course. Teenagers now, tall enough to fill a doorway, old enough to understand silence. They stepped into the hall when they heard the voice. Their mother turned toward them, and something unreadable passed across her face. Relief, maybe, shock. Or maybe the sudden realization that 10 years cannot be crossed in a single glance. "You've grown," she said softly. No one answered right away. The grandmother moved aside and let her in. Not because she trusted the moment, because refusing the doorway would not change what had already arrived. She sat at the kitchen table where she used to drink coffee before her old life split in two. Her eyes moved around the room as if searching for what remained the same. The curtains, the family clock, the marks on the wall where the children's heights had been measured year after year. "I know this is difficult," she began. The grandfather stayed standing. The teenagers sat across from her, stiff and quiet. They did not look at her like a mother who had come home. They looked at her like someone from a story they were no longer sure they believed. She spoke carefully, too carefully. She said she had made mistakes. She said she had been broken back then. She said grief had clouded everything. She said she thought leaving for a while would help her rebuild. Then her voice changed. It became firmer, more certain. "But they're still my children," she said. Legally, nothing changed. The room went still. The grandmother put down the dish towel in her hands. The mother opened her bag and took out a folder. Inside were papers, copies of records, birth certificates, old custody documents that had never really become new ones. "I never signed away my rights," she said. "I let you care for them, that's different." The words landed hard. Not because they were shouted, because they were calm. That calmness made everything worse. The teenagers looked at the folder, then at each other. For 10 years, her absence had felt like abandonment. Now she was speaking as if it had been an arrangement, as if love could be paused, as if parenthood had been safely waiting for her to reclaim it. The grandfather finally spoke. Why now? It was a simple question, but it cut through everything. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. And in that small pause, everyone in the room felt it. She had not come back only because she missed them. That question stayed in the room long after he asked it. Why now? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she folded her hands on top of the folder and looked down, as if the words might appear there if she waited long enough. "My life changed," she said at last. "Things ended. I had time to think." It sounded careful, too careful. The grandmother watched her daughters face the way people study a door they no longer trust. The features were familiar, but the person behind them felt harder to read now. The teenagers said little that first afternoon. They listened. That was all. But listening can be sharper than arguing. Over the next few days, she kept returning. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with the soft voice of someone trying to rebuild a bridge one quiet plank at a time. She told them things she had never said before. She admitted that the man she left with had not wanted children in the house. She admitted that, after a while, it became easier to stay away than to come back and face what she had done. She said shame had grown every year. She said the longer she waited, the harder it felt to explain herself. "I thought if I came back too late, you would hate me," she said. One of the teenagers looked at her for a long moment and asked, "So you stayed away because it was easier for you?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because that was the truth beneath all the softer words. Little details began to slip out as the conversations continued. Her relationship had ended 2 years earlier. The house she once shared with that man was gone. Her job had become unstable. She was living alone now in a smaller place. She spoke often about starting over, about family, about how people should not be alone when life falls apart. Each sentence sounded reasonable by itself. Together, they began to sound like need. The boy noticed it first. "She keeps talking about what she lost," he told his sister later that night. "Not what we lost." That same evening, their grandmother brought out an old box from the top shelf of her bedroom closet. She placed it on the kitchen table without a word. Inside were cards, letters, a few money orders, years of almost contact. The teenagers went through them slowly. Some envelopes had no return message inside, only money and a short note. "Thinking of you. Hope you're well. More later." Some were birthday cards signed with love but nothing personal. Then they found something else. Several of the older envelopes carried postmarks from a town less than an hour away. The dates made the room go still. For nearly 3 years, she had lived close enough to visit any weekend she wanted. She never came. The girl held one of the envelopes between her fingers as if it might explain itself if she stared long enough. "She was right there," she said quietly. Their grandfather nodded once. "She was." When the mother returned the next afternoon, the tone had changed. The folder she brought no longer felt important. The papers on the table were older, Heavier, not legal documents. Evidence of choice. And for the first time since she walked back into the house, the children were no longer waiting for her explanation. They were ready to test it. The final conversation happened at the same kitchen table where almost everything in their lives had been decided. No lawyers, no raised voices, no dramatic threats. Just 4 people sitting in a room that had carried the weight of 10 quiet years. The mother arrived with the same folder she had brought before. But this time, no one looked at it for long. The papers that mattered were already on the table. Old envelopes, birthday cards, money orders, proof that she had been close enough to come back and chose not to. She saw them and understood immediately. Her face changed, not because she had been caught in a lie, because the truth was now too clear to soften. The teenagers spoke before the grandparents did. The boy leaned forward first. His voice was calm. You keep saying you were struggling, and maybe you were, but there were years when you lived close enough to visit. You didn't. His sister looked at the envelope spread between them. You didn't lose us, she said quietly. You left us. The sentence stayed in the room. Their mother tried to answer. She said shame had stopped her. She said every year made it harder to return. She said she did not know how to fix what she had broken. But the children were not asking for a new explanation now. They were asking for honesty. The girl looked at her for a long moment. Did you come back because you missed us? She asked. Or because now you're alone? Their mother's eyes filled, but not a single tear fell at first. She opened her mouth, then looked down at her hands. That silence was answer enough. The grandfather, who had said very little through all of this, finally spoke. We never tried to replace you, he said. We stepped in because someone had to. His voice was not angry. That made it even harder to ignore. The grandmother sat beside the children, one hand resting near the old box of letters. She did not need to defend what the past 10 years had already proven. The mother looked from one face to another. She was staring at the life she had once promised to come back for and realizing it had continued without her. Not perfectly, but fully. The boy spoke again. You're our mother, he said. That's true, but that's not the same as being our parent. His sister nodded. They were there, she said, glancing toward the grandparents. Every day when we were sick, when we were scared, when we needed someone, you were not. The words were not cruel, they were worse than cruel, they were final. Their mother's shoulders dropped slightly, as if something inside her had stopped resisting. So what happens now? She asked. The answer came softly. We're not going with you. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. The children explained that they were willing to speak to her, to know her maybe in time. But not as someone returning to take her place back. That place no longer waited for her. It had been filled by years of ordinary love, sacrifice, and presence. The folder she brought stayed unopened on the table. In the end, it meant almost nothing. Because legal rights may survive on paper, but parenthood does not. Parenthood lives in time, in showing up, in staying when staying is hard. When she finally stood to leave, she did not argue. She looked once more at the kitchen, the old clock, the family photos, the people who had become a family without her. Then she walked to the door. This time, no one asked when she would be back.